In the great story of human origins, some names echo loudly: Neanderthal, Homo erectus, Homo sapiens. Yet, hidden in the margins of this grand tale lies a quieter figure: Homo habilis. They were among the first to carry the name human, and yet most of us hardly know they existed. Why is that? How can one of the most pivotal species in our ancestry be so easily forgotten? Imagine standing on the African plains 2 million years ago. The world is dangerous, unpredictable, and unforgiving. And here, in this crucible of survival, appears a being both fragile and remarkable. Small in stature, but carrying something entirely new, a spark that would set us apart. Homo habilis was neither fully ape nor fully human. They were the in-between, the fragile thread that tied the past to the future. And perhaps because of that, they remain overlooked, overshadowed by the giants that came after. But in this shadow lies their paradox, for while their memory has faded from public imagination, their role in shaping who we are is far from minor. They may not have been the strongest or the smartest of our ancestors, yet in their hands, quite literally, they held the tools that would reshape the destiny of an entire lineage. So why have we forgotten them? And what secrets still lie buried in their bones? To answer that, we must look closer at the creature caught between two worlds, ape and human. Homo habilis was a riddle of flesh and bone. Their body told two different stories at once. From the waist down, they looked more like us than the apes that came before. Long legs and a structure suited for walking upright on the open savanna. Yet from the waist up, their body whispered of the trees. Long arms, curved fingers, and shoulders still designed for climbing. What did this mean? It meant that habilis was not fully committed to either world. They could walk, yes, but not as efficiently as those who came later. They could climb, but not with the ease of their ape-like cousins. They were a species balanced on the knife edge of transition. Even their brain reflected this in-betweenness. Larger than Australopithecus, but far smaller than us, their mind was just beginning to stretch toward new possibilities. And so, scientists have long debated. Should we think of habilis as truly human, or simply a clever ape on its way to becoming something more? The answer, perhaps, is that they were both. It is this liminal state, this being of two worlds, that makes habilis so fascinating. They are not a neat step on the evolutionary ladder, but a reminder that our journey was messy, complicated, and uncertain. But to truly understand them, we must turn to the moment when they first emerged from the earth, a discovery that shook the foundations of science. The year was 1960. In the dry heat of Tanzania's Olduvai Gorge, Mary and Louis Leakey bent over the dust, sifting through fragments of the deep past. They had spent years chasing the story of early humans, combing through layers of ancient earth that told of lives long gone. And then it appeared, a fragment of skull, a piece of jawbone, teeth worn, in a way unlike the apes they knew. Each fragment by itself meant little, but together, they told a story that was unmistakable. What emerged from that dust was neither chimpanzee nor modern human, but something new, something in between. The Leakeys named it Homo habilis, the handyman, because alongside the bones were stone tools, crude flakes chipped from river cobbles, tools that suggested intelligence, foresight, and planning. Tools that redefined what it meant to be human. The discovery caused shockwaves. If this creature truly made tools, then perhaps humanity's roots reached further back than anyone had dared to imagine. The clear line from ape to human was suddenly blurred, but with revelation came controversy. Some hailed Habilis as the dawn of our genus. Others dismissed it as a mere variant of ape, not worthy of the name Homo. The fossil record had revealed its secrets, but also ignited a debate that still lingers today. And so Habilis entered history, not as a clear answer but as a puzzle. A creature with a name, yet, as we will see, not one easily defined. When the Leakeys introduced Homo habilis to the world, they thought they had named humanity's first great innovator. But the scientific community was divided. Was habilis really a human? Or simply a clever ape mistakenly elevated into our family? Some argued its brain was too small, its body too primitive. Others pointed to its tools and upright gait as proof of humanness. Even today, many anthropologists debate whether Habilis belongs in the genus Homo at all, or whether it should be placed back with the Australopithecines. It was a creature that seemed to slip through the cracks of definition. Not ape, not human, something nameless in between, and yet, maybe that very ambiguity is the point. Evolution is not a series of clear, clean steps. It is a messy, branching, uncertain story. Habilis reminds us that humanity was never born in a single moment, with a single spark. It emerged slowly, haltingly, through forms that defied easy classification. But this uncertainty leaves us with a deeper, haunting question. If Habilis was neither ape nor fully human, what does that say about the moment humanity truly began? Here lies the great mystery of Homo habilis. Their bones whisper of transition, their tools hint at imagination, and yet their identity remains clouded in debate. Were they the first humans, or just one of many failed experiments in evolution's grand workshop? And more importantly, does it even matter where we draw the line? Perhaps Habilis's legacy is not in fitting neatly into a category, but in showing us that the human story was never simple. That humanity was not born in a flash of brilliance, but in countless fragile steps, each uncertain, each incomplete. Imagine Habilis, 2 million years ago, crouching in the dust of Olduvai, shaping a stone flake. They could not know what they were beginning. They could not imagine the cities, the sciences, the civilizations that would follow. All they knew was survival. Yet in their hands lay the first spark of something far greater. And so we are left with the haunting thought: what if the true key to our humanity lies not with the famous Neanderthals or the mighty Homo erectus, but with this quiet, forgotten handyman? The question lingers, and it leads us onward, deeper into their world, where the first crude tools become the foundations of everything we are. The first tool maker. Imagine this: the banks of an African river 2 million years ago. The sun beats down, crocodiles lurk in the shallows, and vultures circle lazily above. A small figure crouches in the dust, a young Homo habilis, no taller than a child today. In their hands, a smooth riverstone. They strike it awkwardly against another, chips flying, until a sharp edge appears. This was no play. This was survival. With this edge, marrow could be freed from bones, skin sliced from flesh, roots cut from the soil. To us, it may look crude. To them, it was life itself. Why here? Why now? Some scientists believe hunger drove innovation. Others think curiosity played its role. Whatever the reason, that child's clumsy strikes mark the dawn of technology. The first recorded moment when our ancestors began shaping the world, instead of being shaped by it. It was an act so simple, yet so profound. A chipped stone, barely recognizable as a tool. And yet, in that chipped stone, lay the seed of skyscrapers, spacecraft, and digital screens. What began by the river would ripple outward, reshaping everything that followed. But what exactly were these tools? To answer that, we must step closer into the world of the Oldowan toolkit. The Oldowan. It may sound like an ancient kingdom, but in truth, it was a tradition. The first stone toolkit in human history. These tools were not elaborate. A hammerstone used to strike, a core, the larger stone that fractured, and the flakes, razor-sharp shards, each one capable of cutting through hide and tendon. Crude to our eyes, yet revolutionary to theirs. For the first time, meat from scavenged carcasses could be stripped clean. Bones could be cracked open to reach the fatty, energy-rich marrow that predators left behind. Roots could be dug, plants processed, shelters shaped. With stone in hand, Homo Habilis unlocked resources no ape before them had dared to reach. But this was more than survival. The Oldowan required planning. Choosing the right rock, knowing where to strike, remembering how to repeat the process. It was knowledge that could be shared, observed, imitated. In these stones, scientists see the first whispers of teaching, the first sparks of culture. And with each flake struck from stone, the boundary between ape and human grew thinner. What did it mean for a creature not only to use the world, but to transform it? The answer lies in how these chipped stones forced us to rethink what it meant to be human. For generations, we believed that humans were defined by their tools, that no other creature shaped stone with intent. But the discovery of Oldowan tools alongside Homo habilis fossils shattered that neat divide. Here was a species with a brain not much larger than a chimp's, yet capable of planning, shaping, innovating. They blurred the line we once thought was clear: toolmaker versus animal. So, what then is humanity? Is it language, art, fire? Or was the spark lit much earlier in the chipped stones of Olduvai? The Oldowan tools remind us of a humbling truth. Humanity did not arrive fully formed. It crept forward in hesitant steps, where even creatures we might dismiss as half-human were already shaping the future. And this leap was not only in the mind, but also in the body, in the hands that made it possible, hands whose memory still lives in ours. The secret of Homo habilis was not just in their brain, but in their hands. Fossil evidence shows a thumb more dexterous than that of apes, fingers curved but capable of precise grip, and joints flexible enough to manipulate stone with intent. These were hands made for both worlds, still able to climb trees, yet skillful enough to chip rock. A paradox of evolution and a gift of transition. Think about your own hands, resting as you listen now. Every keystroke, every brush stroke, every gesture owes something to Habilis. Their hands shaped the first flake of stone, and in doing so, set us on a path toward everything we build today. In Habilis, we see the dawn of a partnership between hand and mind, a cycle where each small improvement in dexterity opened doors for new ideas, and each new idea demanded greater skill. But what did this truly mean for the spark of humanity itself? The answer lies not only in stone, but in imagination. A chipped stone may seem unremarkable, yet behind it lay something far greater: foresight. To strike stone was to imagine a future moment, when that edge would cut, when that flake would feed. It was the beginning of what if. Tools were more than weapons or blades. They were shared knowledge, carried from one generation to the next. They were memory made physical. In each flake, we glimpse the roots of culture, of teaching, of imagination. And imagination is dangerous. Once a creature begins to imagine, the world is no longer fixed. A carcass becomes not just food, but opportunity. A rock becomes not just weight, but blade. A mind becomes not just survival, but possibility. This was the spark. Small, fragile, uncertain. Yet it lit the path toward language, fire, and story. It was the first time an ancestor of ours reshaped the world with thought made real. Homo habilis may never have known the magnitude of their own hands, but in their crude tools lay the first flicker of the human spirit, the one that burns in us still. And it is here, at the edge of stone and imagination, that the story of our expanding brain truly begins. The brain that changed everything. 2 million years ago, something extraordinary stirred within the skull of Homo habilis. Their brain, though still small by modern standards, measured between 600 and 700 cubic centimeters, a leap of nearly 30% beyond their Australopithecine ancestors. What does that number mean? Imagine a grapefruit compared to an orange. Modest, perhaps. Yet in evolution, such small leaps change everything. It was not simply more tissue. It was more possibility. This increase in brain volume gave habilis an edge in memory, coordination, and perhaps even rudimentary problem-solving. They could envision a task, plan an action, and recall the lessons of a past mistake. Theirs was a brain stepping beyond instinct. But here lies the paradox. They were far from the towering intellect of modern humans, whose brains would triple this size. Habilis existed in the middle space. No longer simple apes, not yet us. It was an evolutionary experiment in cognition. And that experiment paid off in survival. With sharper senses of planning and recall, habilis could scavenge more effectively, use tools more reliably, and anticipate danger in ways their ancestors never could. Still, a larger brain came at a price. More tissue meant more energy, and evolution does not give without taking away. This brain was both promise and burden, a spark of destiny that carried risks. To understand what it meant to live with such a brain, we must step into the fragile balance between instinct and thought. The crossroads of intelligence. Homo habilis carried a mind divided. On one side, instinct, the quick reflexes of an animal surviving in a brutal world. On the other, the earliest glimmers of higher reasoning, the beginnings of a mind that could plan, reflect, and remember. They were not yet philosophers or storytellers, but imagined the ability to hesitate before acting, to weigh options, to recall where water might be found in the dry season. These were small sparks of a new kind of thinking, but they marked a profound shift. This in-between brain reveals a species learning to navigate two identities: part animal, ruled by survival; part innovator, experimenting with thought. In habilis, we glimpse the earliest tension between the raw instincts of the wild and the fragile dawn of human awareness. It is easy to underestimate this stage, but in the history of our species, the crossroads matter most. Without this delicate balance, the leap to greater intelligence could never have followed. Yet how did this new mind shape the daily lives of habilis? What did it mean for them, standing on the open savanna with predators lurking in the grass? For that, we must imagine their world, not in numbers, but in moments of fear and anticipation. Picture a clearing on the African plain. The air is still, broken only by the buzzing of flies and the distant cough of a lion. A Homo habilis pauses, scanning the horizon. Their eyes move not just to what is there, but to what might come. This was the mental revolution. For the first time, our ancestors were not bound to the immediate present. They could anticipate. To see vultures circling was to imagine the carcass ahead. To hear the rustle of grass was to picture a predator hiding within it. Such thinking meant survival. Anticipation allowed Habilis to act not simply in response but in preparation, to approach food before rivals, to retreat before danger struck. It may seem simple to us now, but the ability to look at the horizon and imagine possibilities was a radical step. It was the seed of foresight, the spark of strategy, the first outlines of a mind capable of planning, but foresight brought tension. To imagine what could be is also to feel fear of what might happen. Anxiety, caution, hesitation, these too are products of a growing brain. And so Habilis lived at the edge of wonder and worry, in a world where their fragile spark of thought was both their shield and their burden. Yet the expansion of intelligence never comes without cost. To carry such a brain required sacrifice, and the price of progress weighed heavily on Habilis. A bigger brain was not free. For Homo habilis, it demanded fuel, vast amounts of energy compared to their ancestors. Every bite of marrow, every scrap of meat scavenged, went first to feed the hungry organ inside their skull. This meant riskier diets, more time spent searching, and greater dependence on cooperation. A brain that helped them survive also made them vulnerable if the environment failed to provide. And the costs did not stop there. A larger brain meant longer, riskier births. Infant skulls, though small by our standards, were already challenging for mothers to deliver. It meant helpless newborns, dependent for longer, demanding more care. Survival was not guaranteed. Here lies the gamble of intelligence. Evolution rolled its dice on Habilis, investing energy and vulnerability in exchange for potential. A gamble that might have failed, but instead opened the door to everything that followed. Still, this fragile balance could not last forever. To see its true impact, we must ask, what revolutions were set in motion by these incremental steps? How did each cubic centimeter of brain matter ripple outward into the destiny of our species? The story of Homo habilis is not one of perfection, but of transition. With every slight increase in brain size, new possibilities emerged. Tools became more refined, cooperation more vital, memory more dependable. They were not yet masters of fire or language, but their minds were beginning to grasp connections, cause and effect, action and consequence. To shape stone today was to eat tomorrow. To share food was to secure bonds. To remember danger was to live another day. These small increments added up. Each fragile step created feedback loops, tools encouraging thought, thought demanding communication, communication fostering social bonds. The scaffolding of humanity rose slowly, almost invisibly, from these beginnings. Homo habilis may not have stood long on the stage of evolution, but in their minds, we see the prototype of what would become us. Theirs was the spark in transition, not a finished flame, but the ember from which fire would one day spread. And as their intelligence flickered and grew, it set the stage for the next revolution in human survival. A shift not only in mind, but in diet, in risk, and in energy itself. A shift that began with marrow and meat, marrow, and the hunt. For millions of years, our ancestors survived on what the land freely offered. Roots, berries, fruits, and leaves. It was a diet of the forest, a diet of apes. But around 2 million years ago, in the shifting savannas of Africa, something changed. Homo habilis began to look beyond the trees. As forests gave way to grasslands, plant foods became scarcer, unpredictable. But carcasses left behind by lions and hyenas offered new possibilities. Where earlier apes might have passed by, Habilis approached. With stone flakes in hand, they cut meat from bone, scavenging scraps from the kills of stronger predators. This was a turning point, not just in diet, but in destiny. To eat flesh was to embrace risk, to enter the circle of competition with some of the deadliest hunters on Earth. Yet it also unlocked a new source of energy, richer and denser than any fruit or tuber. What drove them to take this leap? Was it desperation, curiosity, or simply necessity? Whatever the cause, Habilis took a step no other primate had dared to take. They carved life from the remains of death. And in doing so, they discovered something most predators ignored: the treasure hidden deep within bones. The kill site was often chaos. Vultures swarming overhead, hyenas snapping at the edges, lions circling to reclaim their prize. Yet Habilis saw opportunity where others saw only scraps. Bones, discarded and abandoned, held a secret. Inside their hard shells lay marrow, rich in fat, packed with calories, the perfect fuel for a hungry brain. But reaching it required more than strength. It required ingenuity. Armed with hammerstones, Habilis learned to strike. Again and again, they pounded bones until cracks spread and marrow spilled. It was messy, dangerous work. But in this act, they opened a door no other species had fully walked through. Most predators took flesh. Habilis claimed what was left behind, a hidden treasure overlooked in the frenzy of the kill. It was not glamorous, but it was revolutionary. This marrow became more than food. It became survival insurance. Nourishment when fruit withered, when prey escaped, when the land grew harsh. And in feeding their bodies, it also fed something else: the ever-hungry organ within their skulls. This shift in diet was not merely about survival today. It was about building the foundation for tomorrow, a revolution powered by calories. Brains are greedy. Pound for pound, no organ demands more fuel. And as Homo habilis' brain expanded, so too did its appetite. Plant matter alone could not sustain it. Meat and marrow provided the concentrated energy that evolution demanded. Fatty acids, proteins, and calories from animal foods delivered what no fruit could: dense nutrition in small packages. This meant Habilis could grow bigger brains without spending every waking hour chewing leaves and roots. It freed time for other activities, for making tools, for learning, for surviving. Scientists call this the expensive tissue hypothesis. As our ancestors shifted toward meat, the gut could shrink and the brain could grow. Less energy was needed for digestion, more for cognition, a trade-off written in blood and bone. But this was not just biology, it was strategy. To scavenge marrow and flesh was to tap into a resource few competitors had mastered. It gave Habilis an edge, not in size, not in strength, but in efficiency. And efficiency meant survival. It meant the fragile flicker of intelligence could burn brighter. Yet every mouthful came with a price. To feed at carcass sites was to step into danger, to challenge predators far stronger and fiercer. A meal could nourish the brain, or end a life. Picture the scene. A lion pride drags down a zebra. Hours later, the savannah is littered with bones. The lions are gone, but the danger remains. Hyenas circle, vultures descend, jackals dart in and out. Into this maelstrom creep small bands of Homo habilis. They move cautiously, tools in hand, eyes scanning the horizon. To them, this carcass is not waste. It is salvation. They slice at scraps of flesh, hammer at bones, ripping open what others have left behind. Every moment is stolen time. For at any second, the lions could return, or the hyenas could charge. Here lies the paradox. The very act that fueled their survival could also bring their death. To eat meat was to gamble against the wild. Some days, the risk paid off. Other days, Habilis would scatter into the grass, chased off by stronger jaws. And yet, they returned again and again. Because the reward, the rich calories of meat and marrow, outweighed the terror. But these meals were eaten raw, torn straight from the bone. Fire, that great transformer of food, was still far in the future. And without fire, every bite carried a new danger. For us, it is unthinkable to eat raw flesh, crawling with bacteria, riddled with parasites. But for Homo habilis, this was reality. They had not yet mastered fire. Every meal was consumed as it was found, bloody raw and risky. In those bites lurked unseen killers, pathogens, worms, sicknesses that could spread through a group. Yet hunger was stronger than fear. Without fire, Habilis also missed its other gift, efficiency. Cooked meat yields more calories, breaks down toxins, and softens tough fibers. Fire transforms survival into abundance. Habilis lived before that revolution. Their world was one of raw necessity, and so they adapted. Their bodies tolerated what ours could not. Their immune systems fought battles invisible to us now. Still, it was a fragile existence. The lack of fire limited how far they could push their diet, how safe their food could be. But perhaps it was enough. For even without fire, they had already stepped onto a path no other species had taken. A path of risk, of hunger, of change. A path that would ignite the brain. And in that gamble lay the seeds of a legacy that would echo far beyond their time. Every strike of stone against bone, every bite of raw flesh, every risk taken at the carcass site was a wager. Homo habilis gambled with their lives, but the reward was profound. By embracing danger, they fueled their brains with the calories of meat and marrow. And those brains, in turn, reshaped their destiny. They were not the biggest predators, nor the fiercest fighters. Yet through their choices, they began to tip evolution's scales. It was a fragile bargain, but one that paid off. From marrow-fed brains came sharper tools. From sharper tools came better survival. And from better survival came the long chain of species that would one day lead to us. Imagine Habilis, crouched over a bone, unaware of what they were setting in motion. They were not thinking of the future. They sought only to endure the day, and yet, in their struggle, they planted the seed of humanity's rise. Theirs was the gamble that began to pay, and the fuel they found in bone and flesh would drive the next chapter of our story. The rise of the social brain, the social brain. The African savanna at night was a place of terror. Lions prowled, hyenas laughed in the dark, and the cries of unseen creatures echoed across the plains. For Homo habilis, survival alone was impossible. They were small, vulnerable, and without fire. But together, they found safety. Imagine a camp at dusk. A cluster of habilis huddled close, backs to each other, eyes scanning the horizon. They shared warmth. They shared vigilance. A lone individual could be hunted down in silence, but a group could raise alarms, could scatter predators, could endure. It is here, in this fragile ring of bodies, that the true revolution of habilis may have begun. Not with stone, not with meat, but with one another. Theirs was not yet the complex society of later humans, but even the simple act of staying close at night planted the seed of something profound. To survive together was to live another day. To live another day was to pass on knowledge, tools, memory. And so the brain of habilis was not only shaped by food or tools, but by the necessity of others, the need to trust, to cooperate, to belong. But how did this closeness change their chances against predators and their search for food? To answer, we must look at the strength that comes not from muscle, but from numbers. Predators ruled the plains, a lion's claws, a hyena's jaws. Against such power, Habilis had little hope. Yet numbers turned weakness into strength. In a group, one set of eyes could rest, while another stayed alert. Together, they could chase away scavengers, surround vulnerable young, or intimidate smaller predators. Survival became less about individual strength and more about coordination. But numbers also meant opportunity. Foraging for fruits and roots became more efficient when spread among many. One could dig, another could cut, a third could carry. Together, they could scavenge more quickly, stripping carcasses before hyenas returned. The savanna demanded risk, but in groups, Habilis tilted the odds in their favor. Still, there is a deeper layer here. Living together was not only about survival, it demanded tolerance, patience, and, at times, sacrifice. To accept another at your side meant competing for food, for space, for safety. And yet, Habilis chose togetherness over isolation. And in that choice lay the foundation of community. But cooperation is more than defense and foraging. It begins to show itself in the smallest of gestures. A scrap of meat passed, a tool shared, a hand extended. These were the first glimmers of something entirely new. Picture a Habilis crouched over a cracked bone, marrow glistening inside. Hunger gnaws, yet from the corner of the eye comes another. A young one, weaker, expectant. Does the first turn away, or does a hand reach out, passing a piece? We cannot know for certain, but the archaeological record hints that Habilis may have shared. Cut marks on bones suggest not just individual meals, but group feasts. Tools, found scattered together, hint at use beyond the solitary. If food was divided, even crudely, it meant more than calories. It meant trust. It meant recognizing that another's survival strengthened the group as a whole. Sharing a tool or a scrap of meat may seem small. Yet in those moments, the walls between self and other began to blur. This was not generosity as we know it. It was practical, perhaps instinctive. But in it, we glimpsed the roots of cooperation that would define all of human history. And from sharing came something deeper still, a flicker of awareness, however faint, that another's pain, another's need, mattered. The beginnings of empathy in embryo. What happens when a Habilis was injured? A broken arm, a torn leg. In the wild, weakness often means death. Yet fossils suggest that some individuals lived on despite crippling injuries. How? Perhaps because others did not abandon them. To protect the injured, to let them heal, required patience. It required slowing down for the sake of another. That is more than instinct. It is the shadow of empathy. In caring for the weak, Habilis may have discovered the power of compassion. To stand by another was to strengthen bonds. To keep them alive was to preserve knowledge, experience, memory. In helping others, Habilis helped themselves. This empathy was not yet language, not yet morality. It was fragile, incomplete. But it was real. And in those early acts of care, the first emotional bonds were formed. The roots of love, loyalty, even grief. And that grief perhaps emerged most sharply when death came. What did Habilis do when one of their own died? Did they pause? Did they notice the silence left behind? We will never know. But the question haunts us. Fossil sites show clusters of bones, individuals close in death as they may have been in life. Did their companions linger? Did they feel the absence? Grief is more than a human trait. Even elephants touch the bones of their dead. Chimpanzees carry the bodies of infants for days. If our primate cousins show such behaviors, could Habilis, standing at the threshold of humanity, have felt the same? Without language, mourning would not be expressed in words, but in actions. A watchful gaze, a reluctance to leave the fallen, perhaps a shared stillness. If Habilis mourned, even in the smallest way, then the emotional landscape of humanity began far earlier than we once thought. And in this, we find the most profound truth of all. The greatest revolution of Habilis was not stone nor meat, but one another. In the story of Homo Habilis, tools and meat often take the spotlight. But perhaps the truest revolution was quieter. It was in the circle at dusk, in the shared marrow, in the hand extended to the injured. Here, in fragile bonds of trust and care, lay the beginnings of something uniquely human: empathy, connection. The sense that survival is not only about oneself, but about the group. It was imperfect, inconsistent, perhaps fleeting, yet it was there. And once lit, that social spark could not be extinguished. It would grow into families, clans, tribes, nations. It would shape every step of humanity's rise. Homo Habilis may have vanished, but their legacy lives on, not just in our hands and brains, but in our hearts. For in their campfires of connection, however dim, humanity itself began to glow. And with this social spark, Habilis prepared the way for the next challenge, living not only alongside each other, but alongside rivals, other species, other humans, waiting at the edge of the savannah, walking into tomorrow. The skeleton of Homo Habilis tells a story of contradiction. When scientists pieced together their remains, they found a body that didn't fit neatly into any category. From the hips downward, the evidence was clear. They could walk upright. Their legs were longer than those of their Australopithecine ancestors, and their feet bore the marks of a creature that had learned to stride across open ground. But look upward, and a different story emerges. Their arms were long, their fingers curved, their shoulders built for climbing. These were not the limbs of a permanent ground dweller, but of a species that still found refuge among the trees. What does this mean? That Habilis lived in two worlds at once. They could stand on the savannah, scanning for danger, yet when threatened, they could scramble up a tree, gripping branches with the skill of their ape-like ancestors. To scientists, this mosaic of traits reveals an evolutionary transition frozen in bone. They were not yet committed to life on the ground, but no longer confined to the canopy. They were, quite literally, caught in the middle, and this middle place gave them a unique way of moving through their world, a stride neither fully ape nor fully human, but something in between. When Habilis walked, it was not with the fluid, upright ease of modern humans, nor was it the knuckle walk of apes. Their gait was awkward, uneven, a compromise between two evolutionary paths. They stood straighter than their predecessors, but their knees and hips still carried echoes of the forest. Each step bore the tension of adaptation, as though their bodies were testing a new design, not yet perfected. To imagine them moving across the savannah is to see an experiment in progress. Their legs pushed them forward, but their arms, long and powerful, still swung with a hint of climbing purpose. They were walkers, but also climbers, a hybrid of motion. This halfway stride was not weakness alone. It was a bridge. It allowed Habilis to forage across open plains, then retreat to the safety of branches when predators drew near. It gave them flexibility, even if it lacked elegance. Yet to live between two worlds meant never belonging fully to either. To understand how this shaped their lives, we must see Habilis in motion, navigating both the trees and the plains in search of survival. Picture the African landscape 2 million years ago. Patches of forest scattered among vast open grasslands. Here lived Habilis, a creature uniquely suited to both. In the morning, they might climb trees to pluck fruit or scan for danger. By midday, they could descend to the ground, crossing open plains to scavenge carcasses or gather roots. Their bodies were not perfect for either world, but good enough for both. And in that balance lay survival. Moving through branches required agility, balance, and curved fingers gripping bark. But stepping into the savanna demanded vigilance, speed, and the courage to face predators in the open. Few species could claim this dual ability. This lifestyle also shaped their minds. To shift constantly between environments meant adapting strategies, remembering pathways, anticipating threats. Theirs was a brain learning to juggle multiple realities, a skill that echoes in us today. But nature is not forgiving of half measures. To belong to two landscapes was to risk being outcompeted in both. For while Habilis clung to their dual existence, other species were adapting more decisively. And in that choice, Habilis's greatest strength revealed its greatest vulnerability. Evolution favors the specialist. The cheetah runs faster. The leopard climbs higher. The elephant endures longer. Homo habilis, however, was a generalist. And while that versatility kept them alive, it also left them vulnerable. In the trees, they could not rival apes who were stronger climbers. On the plains, they could not match the speed or endurance of later humans. They lived in a fragile middle ground, surviving not by domination, but by adaptation. But environments change. Forests shrank, grasslands expanded, and predators grew fiercer. Against these pressures, being good enough at both worlds was no longer sufficient. Competitors who specialized, like the more advanced Homo erectus, began to overshadow them. And so Habilis's dual nature, once a gift, became a liability. To be in between was to always be at risk of falling behind. Yet this very vulnerability is what makes their story poignant. Their bones remind us that evolution is not a straight ladder, but a series of fragile experiments. And Habilis stood at a crossroads, a moment where two futures diverged. The anatomy of Habilis is more than science. It is metaphor. They were quite literally a crossroads in flesh and bone. Behind them lay the forests of their ancestors. Ahead, the open plains that would shape the destiny of humankind. Every curved finger spoke of the past. Every upright step whispered of the future. They carried both histories within a single body. But such a crossroads cannot last forever. Evolution demands a choice, even if the species itself does not make it. Others, like Homo erectus, would commit fully to the ground, their bodies streamlined for endurance, their strides efficient for long journeys. Habilis, caught in the middle, could not keep pace. Still, their role was not failure. To stand at the crossroads is to be the bridge. Without Habilis, the leap forward may never have been possible. Their mixed anatomy was the price of transition, the necessary experiment on which later triumphs were built. And so they walk, half in shadow, half in light, carrying us toward tomorrow. In the fading light of prehistory, picture Homo habilis stepping across the savanna. Behind them, the forests of their past. Ahead, the endless plains of their future. Each step uncertain, yet filled with possibility. They didn't know they were at the dawn of something greater. They did not know that their awkward stride carried the weight of all who would follow. They only knew the daily struggle. To feed, to survive, to endure. But in their walk, we see the symbol of humanity itself. Never fixed, always in transition, always moving forward. Homo habilis walked not with perfection, but with courage. And though their species would fade, their steps echo in every journey we take today. They carried both the memory of the trees and the promise of the plains. And in that fragile in-betweenness, they walked into tomorrow, the rival within. Homo habilis did not walk through an empty world. Their days were not lived in isolation, but in the company of rivals, and sometimes of cousins. Alongside them roamed the last of the Australopithecines, the older, more ape-like species, who still clung to the forests. And, not long after, a new figure entered the stage, Homo erectus. Taller, stronger, with larger brains and more advanced tools, they were a vision of the future standing in the same savannas. For Habilis, this meant one simple truth. They were not the only experiment in humanity. Evolution, it seems, does not place its bets on a single hand. It creates many versions, many branches, many contenders. Imagine the tension of that reality. To survive, Habilis had to forage, to scavenge, to build fragile lives in a landscape already occupied by both the shadows of the past and the promise of the future. Here, every meal was contested, every shelter temporary, every path uncertain. They lived in a crowded evolutionary neighborhood where success depended not only on what you could take from the land, but on how you navigated the presence of others. And the savanna was crowded indeed. The African plains were not a gentle refuge. They were a battleground of survival, layered with species competing for the same scarce resources. Australopithecines still moved in the shadows of shrinking forests, gathering fruits and roots. Habilis wandered between trees and plains, scavenging meat and marrow. And early erectus, stronger and sharper, was beginning to spread into the same territories, claiming ground with greater efficiency. Now add the predators, lions stalking herds, hyenas crunching bones, leopards lurking in trees. Add the scavengers, vultures overhead, jackals at the edges. In this tangled web, Habilis was but one thread, fragile, easily broken. Food was not just scarce, it was contested at every level. To strip a carcass was to compete with hyenas. To dig for roots was to work the same soil as Australopithecines. To scavenge before erectus arrived was a race against time itself. This crowding was not just ecological, it was evolutionary. The very traits that helped Habilis survive were tested every day against neighbors who were stronger, faster, or simply better adapted. And in this gauntlet, they were not only competitors, but also prey. To be Habilis was to live in fear as much as in hope. Their small frames, barely over a meter tall, made them easy targets for the giants of the savanna. Lions could bring them down in an instant. Hyenas could scatter them from a carcass. Eagles might even have carried off their young. Death was never far away. But Habilis was not defenseless. With tools in hand, they could slash meat from bone and perhaps wave stone edges to deter smaller predators. Their eyes were sharp, their minds alert, their groups watchful. Still, the balance of power was not in their favor, and the danger came not only from beasts, but from their own kin in evolution. To find a carcass was often to find others already there, hyenas tearing, vultures diving, or even other hominins claiming the kill. Survival was a constant negotiation, a daily wager between predator and prey. And Habilis, caught in the middle, lived on the knife edge of existence. But what of their cousins, the emerging Homo erectus? Were they rivals at the table of survival, or something even harsher, competitors who pushed Habilis toward extinction? Evolution's harshest rivalries are not always between predator and prey. but between kin. For Habilis, the most dangerous competition may have come not from lions, but from their fellow humans. Fossils show Habilis and early erectus overlapping in time and space. Two species of human, walking the same land, using similar tools, hunting the same opportunities, but erectus had the advantage. Larger bodies, larger brains, more efficient gaits, and tools growing in sophistication. Did they fight? Did they drive Habilis from carcasses, from shelters, from water holes? Or did the contest remain unspoken? The quiet erosion of one species by another better adapted? We cannot know if clashes turned violent, but the outcome is clear. Over time, Habilis dwindled as erectus thrived. The torch of survival passed silently from one to the other. And so Habilis faced not just the struggle of predators and environment, but the weight of being overshadowed by their own evolutionary kin. But the end of Habilis was not only about rivals, it was about change itself. Shifts in climate, in habitat, in opportunity, all converging to close their chapter in the human story. By 1.4 million years ago, Homo habilis had vanished. Their disappearance was not sudden, but a slow fading, written in fewer fossils, in scattered traces that grew ever more rare. Why did they fade? The reasons remain debated. Climate shifts transformed landscapes, shrinking forests and spreading drier plains. Food sources changed, and competition grew sharper. Predators continued their relentless pressure. And above all, erectus rose, a species better suited to the open savanna, with stronger bodies and expanding minds. Habilis was the in-between, and in a world demanding specialization, in-betweenness was no longer enough. Yet extinction is not always failure. It is transition. Habilis may have disappeared as a species, but what they carried, their tools, their survival strategies, their spark of intelligence, did not vanish. It flowed forward, absorbed into the lineage that endured, and so Habilis left the stage, but not without leaving something of themselves behind. Though Habilis is gone, their echo lives in us. The name itself, handyman, captures their greatest gift. The first tools, the first spark of ingenuity. Every time we cut, carve, or shape the world, we carry their legacy in our hands. Every act of cooperation, every shared meal, every glance of empathy owes something to those fragile bands huddled on the savanna. Habilis was not the strongest. They were not the final form, but they were the turning point. They showed that survival could come from intelligence as much as from strength, from unity as much as from claws or teeth. Their seeds of legacy grew in erectus, blossomed in Neanderthals, and flowered fully in us. And though their bones lie silent, their spirit endures, not as a lost experiment, but as a foundation. Homo habilis may have vanished, yet in every tool we hold, in every idea we pass on, their shadow still walks beside us. And from their fading, the stage was cleared for the next great chapter in humanity's rise, the handyman's legacy. Names are powerful. They survive long after bones crumble to dust, carrying stories across generations. And for Homo habilis, one name has endured above all others: the handyman. It was the Leakey family, working in Olduvai Gorge in the 1960s, who gave them this title. They saw not just bones and fragments, but tools lying alongside them. Crude flakes of stone, sharpened by deliberate strikes. For the first time, humanity's lineage seemed tied not only to upright posture, but to the ability to shape the world with hands. The name captured an idea bigger than the fossils themselves. Habilis were not the strongest, nor the most advanced. Yet with those small tools, They crossed a threshold. They became the species that began to remake their environment, however clumsily. And so, handyman became their legacy, a word that ensured they would never vanish entirely into obscurity. For in that single name lies recognition of ingenuity, of craft, of beginnings. But their true story is not frozen in a label. It continues in us, in the very hands we use every day. Look at your hands, the opposable thumb, the dexterity of your fingers, the ability to grip, twist, and shape. These are not just tools of the present, they are echoes of Habilis. Their anatomy revealed thumbs capable of precision, fingers curved yet flexible, joints strong enough for both climbing and crafting. With these hands, Habilis shaped stone into flakes, flakes into blades, and blades into survival. They carved their lives from a hostile land, one strike at a time. But the echo did not stop there. Our hands today still carry their memory. The same dexterity that chipped stone now writes novels, performs surgery, paints canvases, and builds machines that touch the stars. Every keyboard tapped, every scalpel wielded, every brushstroke drawn is part of a lineage that began when Habilis first held stone against stone. It is humbling to realize that the simplest of actions, the grip of a pen, the swipe of a finger, links us to beings who lived 2 million years ago. Their legacy is not abstract. It is physical, embodied in our very anatomy. Yet what Habilis achieved with those hands went beyond mere survival. Their tools signaled not only necessity, but imagination. At first glance, the tools of Habilis seem crude. A flake chipped here, an edge sharpened there. But hidden within them is something extraordinary, the leap from instinct to intention. Toolmaking was more than survival. It was foresight, the ability to imagine a problem before it occurred, to prepare for the cut, the scrape, the meal yet to come. In every chipped stone was a moment of vision, a spark of thought about tomorrow. And when tools are shared, when their making is observed and imitated, something else emerges: culture. Knowledge passed not through genes, but through teaching, through memory, through example. This is the foundation of creativity itself. From Habilis came the understanding that the world was not fixed, that it could be altered by human hands, that a stone could become a blade, and a blade could change the odds of survival. It was a fragile beginning, yes, but it was also the first step toward art, language, and invention. And Habilis themselves remind us of a deeper truth. They were neither the first to dream nor the last to innovate, but they were the bridge that made both possible. In the long timeline of human evolution, Habilis stands as a paradox. They were not the first tool users. Even Australopithecines may have experimented with stone. And they were not the last, for erectus would surpass them in skill, and later humans would perfect the craft. Yet Habilis mattered because they stood at the turning point. Their brain was small compared to ours, but large enough to experiment. Their tools were simple but deliberate. Their lives were fragile, yet resilient, enough to pass on the seed of ingenuity. They remind us that humanity is not born in sudden revolutions, but in countless small steps. No single moment defines us. Instead, it is the fragile bridges between what came before and what followed after. Habilis was one such bridge, neither beginning nor end, but the middle path through which the spark of human possibility flowed. Without them, the leap to erectus may never have been made. Without them, the long arc of creativity and intelligence might have faltered. They were imperfect, incomplete, and yet essential. A reminder that progress does not come from perfection, but from persistence. And in their persistence lay a fragile spark, one that carried the weight of everything to come. A chipped stone is easy to dismiss, yet in that chipped stone lies the fragile spark of humanity. Homo habilis lived on the edge of survival, their tools crude, their lives short. But what they carried was not strength of body, nor mastery of environment. It was the idea that the world could be reshaped. Small, imperfect, incomplete, their tools were the flicker before the flame. But from flickers come wildfires. From imperfect edges came the foundation for art, science, and civilization. Theirs was not a grand triumph, but a fragile experiment that endured just long enough to change everything. And perhaps nothing captures their legacy better than one final image, a sunrise they themselves could never comprehend. Imagine this: Olduvai Gorge, 2 million years ago. The first rays of sunlight creep across the horizon. A group of Homo habilis stirs, gathering together for warmth, tools clutched in their hands. One pauses, gazing at the rising sun. They do not know what lies ahead. They do not know that their fragile spark will ignite a story spanning continents and millennia. To them, the sunrise is simply another day to survive. And yet, in their struggle, they have already changed the world. Their chipped stones are the first notes in the song of humanity. Their hands, rough but capable, are the ancestors of all creation to come. We are their legacy. Every invention, every work of art, every dream of tomorrow carries their echo. The handyman, long vanished, still walks with us. From the sunrise over Olduvai to the lights of our cities, the journey continues, and it all began with them, the forgotten handymen who lit the first spark of what it means to be human.